Hey Book Dragons, I'm so glad that you're here today. I'm going to do my long-awaited review for Misery by Stephen King. I completed this novel around the beginning of October. I had originally started it in September, and then I just continued it on into October and finished it. And I have thoughts. It is definitely one of Stephen King's better books, in my experience. Definitely won't reach my top tier of Stephen King reads, but it's a very, very good book. I'll say that right off the bat. So if you're looking for a good Stephen King book to read, Misery is definitely one of those, with some caveats. There is a lot of brutality in this book. Now, if you are coming to Misery for the first time, but you have seen the movie, you will kind of know the major story beats. But there was so much left out of the movie, and frankly, a lot was changed in the movie, and I get why. The director wanted to make it more palatable to a broader audience, because there are things in this book that are not very palatable. So let's get right into the review. We are following two main characters. Three, if you count the fictional character within this fictional book. So Misery follows two main characters, one of which is Annie Wilkes. She is kind of a recluse, just lives off by herself. She's got an enormously well-stocked pantry, kind of preparing for the end of the world kind of pantry. She doesn't have a whole lot of visitors. She doesn't really like her neighbors. She's just definitely one of those people that prefers to be by herself and in her own little world. And then, of course, you've got Paul Sheldon. Now, Paul Sheldon is a famous author. He is famous for writing the exploits of a character named Misery Chastain, and that is kind of where the book gets its name, but also it's a play on words because there's a lot of misery in this book, and I'm not just talking about Misery Chastain. There's a lot of misery in this book, mostly for Paul Sheldon. But anyway, Paul Sheldon, famous author, and he just finished a new novel. He is on his way to a remote place in Colorado to relax and unload and unwind, kind of his MO for every time he finishes a new book. And, he gets caught in a bad snowstorm and his car runs off the road into a ditch and he gets fairly banged up. So come along, Annie Wilkes. Paul Sheldon just happens to be her favorite author. She happens to be his number one fan. And you'll hear that several times in the book. She is one of those fans that you never want to meet. You never want to meet Annie Wilkes if you're her favorite author or actor or whatever it might be. You just don't want to meet Annie Wilkes. So that's the gist of the story. She rescues Paul from his wrecked car and takes him to her home to nurse him back to health. I am going to do a few more little tidbits that are spoiler-free throughout this review. And then I'm going to move into spoiler territory. So I will let you know when I move into spoiler territory so that you can skip that part if you want to. There is also going to be a section in this video for the movie. I will talk differences between the book and the movie, so that's probably going to be a little spoilery, so you may want to step away if you have not watched the movie, whatever, but I will let you know when those sections happen. Continuing on just with the spoiler-free, I will say that this book may be triggering for some people. Not only is it extremely brutal, she is one of those diehard fans that will hurt you if you are not behaving yourself and listening to the nurse and doing what she thinks you should do because she's got your best interests at heart. Depending on her mood, it could be way more brutal than you had ever thought possible. And this is one of those closed room scenarios. They're just in Annie's house. It's just Annie and Paul for the majority of the book. And it is a deep character study. And I love it for that. The characters were so well fleshed out. You get to know both of these characters really, really well, especially Annie Wilkes. And you even get to know Misery Chastain a little more than you really cared to be perfectly honest. It's a character study of a person who has been cut off from the world on purpose. So she's kind of done it to herself, but she has done things in her past that have made her feel like it's probably better if she just lives apart from the world. And I won't go into the details of what those things are, but you will find those out throughout the course of this book. They are not pretty. You will find out that Annie Wilkes is a very disturbed woman. And so I say there's a lot of triggers in the book because there can be, if you do not like a lot of violence in your books, this might not work for you. If you don't like gore, and I mean gore, you may not like this book. But if you don't mind those things, it is a fantastic story. Kind of. The types of brutality in this book, I would say, would be considered body horror in some respects. So, if you don't like body horror, just letting you know that right up front, okay? I think the thing that was most memorable for me, not the brutality, not the body horror and stuff like that, not the blood and gore, but the thing that really stuck out to me was the deep dive into Annie's psyche. And here's where it kind of became real for me. I grew up with a mother who had bipolar disorder. And Annie has bipolar disorder. They call it manic depression in this book because that's what the DSM called it at the time. That's what it was clinically called, manic depressive disorder. My mom was diagnosed as manic depressive at the time, and then it later came to be known as bipolar. And it was very difficult growing up. I had a decent relationship with my mom, but it was difficult. Now, there is no comparison to Annie Wilkes. Annie Wilkes is a far more extreme version of this particular mental disorder. I don't want people to hear me say that my mom was that bad. She was not. And I don't know a ton about bipolar disorder except from my own personal experience of it with my mom. But I don't know many versions of it that would go to the extremes that Annie does. Maybe for a person who's extremely isolated like Annie Wilkes is, that might cause some of those extremities. I don't know. A lot of times when people have bipolar disorder, they are in treatment centers or they're on regular medication for it and things like that. Annie Wilkes was not. That becomes pretty obvious throughout the book. But she has her ups and downs. She has her good moments, and she has her extremely depressed moments, and she has a deep-seated anger that, I think of it as kind of like waking the beast. And Paul discovers throughout the book the things that he has to do to avoid waking the beast. It's a very disturbing at times novel. And as I said, I think it's a very extreme portrayal of bipolar disorder. And I don't know how realistic it is. So I want to say that right off the bat. I don't know totally how realistic it is. And maybe it is. I have not seen the extreme versions of it. My mom was very stable with hers. Even though we had difficulties, she was very stable overall. So I think that's the part that really stuck out to me in this book. And I hope that hasn't been too spoilery for you, but you will see all the details of it if you read the book. So I just wanted to state that up front. I would say that for this book, for my videos on YouTube, I would give it a thumbs up. It was a good story. It was fast-paced. It was gripping at times. But it was a very heavy book as well. And even though it's a short book, I think it's under 300 pages. It took me a long time to get through because I had to take it in chunks. I had to take it in bites. I had to put it down for a while and chew on it and then go back to it. So it took me a long time to read it, even though it's technically a very short book. So I do recommend it with those caveats that I mentioned before. So let's move to spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, now is your time to tune out. You can stop it here and we're going to talk spoilers. I'm not going to go into a lot of spoilers, but I was very surprised as I got to certain parts in the book how very, very different it was from the movie. And that happens with movies, right? That happens. But it was definitely toned down. Just the sheer weight of brutality that was actually in this novel, I was not prepared for. I had seen people talk about that scene, and I wasn't exactly sure what they meant by that scene, although I know in the movie there was a particular scene where she did something very not nice to his legs. And when I got to that part in the book, I had a feeling that I knew what was coming. And I'm like, no, they're not going to, no, they're not going to do that. She's not going to do that. She brings out the damn axe. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Chops off his damn foot. And I'm like, are you serious? And then later on in the book, she chops off his finger. And at times, the extreme lack of self-care on Annie's part and the way it was described, how vividly it was described, really put you in the moment. And you're like, oh my goodness, she's really depressed at this point in the book. Because, there's just no self-care. I mean, she manages to somehow bring Paul Sheldon what he needs during that time, but oh my gosh, some of the extreme dismembering really got to me. And I'm used to that. Like, I would never watch the Saw movies. Those are not really my cup of tea, but I'm used to some things like that. But it was so vividly described that I was just like, oh gosh, I got to put this down. And then later on in the book, when the police deputy arrives and Paul shouts out to him from the window and he's like, help me, and he runs over the guy with the riding lawnmower and, blood is splattering everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God, what is... I had no idea, because none of that was in the movie, right? Oh my goodness. Yeah, those are the things that really stuck out to me about the book that I wasn't quite prepared for. And, people have mentioned about certain Stephen King books, like thinking about Stephen King and like hypothetically asking him, what was done to you as you were growing up that made these things come out of your head? Because there is a very realistic, almost too realistic sense to some of the things that are in his books, and Misery is no different. And, I haven't dived deep into Stephen King, and I don't know if there's an autobiography of him or anything out there, but so I don't know if he grew up with parents who had mental illness and different things like that, but he has a finger on the pulse when it comes to developing characters like this, and that was fantastic, but also extremely unsettling. Yeah, I was not ready for some of it. And so I really felt like I was in that house and in that room with Paul Sheldon, and it was unsettling and yet so well done. This is my youngest child's favorite book of Stephen King's, and I can see why. I would not call it my favorite by any means, but I did really enjoy it, and I would highly recommend it if you can handle some of these things. And as I said in the previous section, I do give it a thumbs up. It's well done. It's definitely one of Stephen King's better books, but oh man, there were times that it was really, really rough. So let's talk about the movie. For me personally, I think the movie is the better story for me. Not in terms of being a good adaptation, because it is not. It is a shadow at best of the book, and completely different at times. I mean, instead of the axe, she uses a hammer, and at this point his legs are already pretty battered, and she more or less re-breaks his legs. And there's definitely more of a noticeable psychological element to the movie than there is to the extreme body horrors. And I think that was probably good. I mean, at the time, I don't think the director could have done the book just because of the extremities that are in the story. So for the time that the movie was made, I think it's probably best. Nowadays we have the Saw movies, and that's just commonplace. As I said before, I have no desire to watch those, because that's just not my thing, but they're popular. My youngest kid loves the Saw movies, and hey, to each their own. I respect it, just not my thing. But back then, I don't think it would have flown in the theaters, and so I think the director, and I believe it was Rob Reiner, I think Rob Reiner did the best he could with the material for the audience that he was trying to reach and for what he knew was possible in that particular era of cinema. So I think it was a really good movie. I really enjoyed it. I've heard that there might be an alternate ending floating out there. I have no idea. I've looked up on the internet, and it says that there's only one version. So, and that's okay. Kathy Bates was brilliant, just absolutely fantastic. She embodied Annie Wilkes' character so well that it was, wow. I've seen her in other things, and I liked her in those as well. But yeah, her role in Misery, there's a reason it's so well loved, and her performance in that is so well loved. James Caan was excellent as Paul Sheldon as well. He brought a gravitas to that role that I don't know if anyone could have done better. But it was just some of the changes that they made to the story that make it stand out so differently. And I would give the movie a thumbs up as well, by the way. It was good as entertainment. not as an adaptation, but I think it doesn't need to be a good adaptation for what it was trying to do. One thing I was very surprised by was the ending, because the ending of the book was not bad in a sense that you couldn't have shown it in theaters. But in the movie, they chose to go with a different ending where he's at a book signing and a lady comes up to the table and she's bringing him a drink or coffee or something. And she's like, hey, I'm your number one fan. And he's just, you can tell he's unsettled. He's like, oh God, not again, kind of reaction. And the movie just ends there. And I'm like, that was an interesting ending when I first saw the movie. And now that I've read the book, I'm like, wow, that was very different. And I'm not sure why Rob Reiner did that, but it's okay. It was still a good movie. I really enjoyed it. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. All things considered, I definitely give the book a thumbs up. I give the movie a thumbs up. I thought they were both very, very well done for the medium that was being used. You know, Stephen King's an excellent writer. And this is one of those books where I think it just goes to prove that his shorter fiction is way better than his longer fiction. I just have not had good experiences with his longer stories. They're just way overwritten and the pace just really drags. But his shorter books, boy, they pack a punch. And this one really packed a punch. And I loved the movie as well. So if you have seen the movie or read the book, you know, either or maybe you've done both, let me know in the comments below what you think, what you thought of my review, what stood out to you in the book or the movie that maybe I didn't mention. I would love to know that too. It has been a while since I've seen the movie, to be fair. I saw it last year sometime, I think. But parts of it are very vivid in my memory. And then having just read the book, it brought back a lot of things from the movie to me as well. But let me know in the comments what you thought, any of your reactions. I would love to hear from you. And I will do my best to pin a spoiler comment section in the comments below so that you can talk spoilers. But please don't put spoilers in the other comments in the main comment section. We'll save that for a spoiler comment section, okay? And I think that's it. I'm going to end it there. Make sure you guys read more books. Thank you for being here. And if you want to watch more of my content, check out the on screen here.